If you hadn't already guessed from the way I've decorated my new place, I'm a pretty big fan of the Harry Potter franchise. I've read all the books, seen all the movies, collected a great deal of merchandise. What can I say? It's the closest thing to being the Star Wars of my generation, outside of the Star Wars of my generation. But ever since the film series wrapped back in 2011, Warner Brothers still wanted to find new ways to milk the magic of author J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World, which resulted in the first of a 5-part prequel series, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. The film took place in the late 1920s, where we follow a new set of characters, including magical zoologist Newt Scamander, played by Eddie Redmayne, the Goldstein sisters, Tina and Queenie, played by Catherine Waterston and Alison Sudol respectively, and the only Muggle in the group, Jacob Kowalski, played by Dan Fogler, running around New York City in search of escaped magical creatures, kinda like Pokemon. While it may not be on par with the previous 8 films, it still had plenty of charm and likable new characters to keep most of us Potterheads curious enough to see where these new set of films go. Which brings us to the second film in the prequel series, The Crimes of Grindelwald, which takes place roughly 6 months later, where we find out the evil wizard this movie was named after, played by Johnny Depp, has escaped custody and plans to rally the rest of the wizarding community against the non-magical world and those that oppose him. Meanwhile, Newt has been appointed by a much younger version of Dumbledore, played by Jude Law, to travel over to France and find the dangerously powerful and very much alive Credence, played by Ezra Miller, before Grindelwald recruits him to quote-unquote make the Wizarding World great again. This marks as the 6th movie in the Wizarding World series to be helmed by director David Yates, as well as the 2nd written by the creator herself, which seems pretty cool at first, but judging from the critical consensus of both critics and audiences, it would seem to be the complete opposite. For one thing, having the same director on for more than one film can be a bit of a problem in some cases. Sure, they'll know the world and characters like the back of their hand, but if they're not able to reinvent themselves and offer something new to the table, or at the very least find somebody else who's more than capable of doing so, then the movies are going to start looking a lot like carbon copies of one another and possibly lose a good chunk of its fan base a lot faster than you could say Quidditch. As for Rowling, there's no doubt in my mind that she is a very talented storyteller, but this new script of hers clearly needed some work done. It has entire scenes filled with non-stop exposition, seemingly apparent plot holes created for the sake of fan service, a shocking number of infant deaths that I'm a bit surprised didn't garner any type of controversy, a few too many nods to our current political landscape when most of us are trying to escape that reality via the movies, and a seemingly out-of-nowhere twist ending that left even the diehard fans going, "What?" After a while, it hardly starts to resemble anyone's story because the plot is too focused on setting up things that won't come into play until the next 3 movies, leaving very little room for any kind of character development. I don't know. Maybe if they got Steve Kloves, the same guy responsible for adapting almost every single Harry Potter book to the big screen, to help co-write Rowling's new stories, I think we might see a big improvement in the films to follow. But despite having a great deal of problems, is there anything in this movie that actually worked? Absolutely. The things that did work for me were the usual things that make these movies so damn appealing in the first place, like the art direction, the costume designs, the creature effects, the action set pieces, or at least the ones that weren't shot completely in the dark, and the likable characters from the previous entry. In fact, I really liked what they did with the romantic subplot between Newt and Tina this time around, as it played more natural here than it did before, which kind of felt forced and unwarranted. The ongoing relationship between Jacob and Queenie was also something I found myself fully invested in, despite it going down a pretty dark and tragic path. Please have a happy ending. Please have a happy ending. It also helps that the performances all around were very good, even those who felt undeserving of such praise. Yeah, as much as I agree with every other sane person in the world that it was a poor decision to cast someone as highly questionable as Johnny Depp to play the titular villain, I do have to give credit where credit is due by saying he actually did a fine job in the role. The same can be said about Jude Law's new take on Dumbledore, as limited as he was on screen, even though I still struggle to see how this version of Dumbledore could settle for this version of Grindelwald when we had a perfectly good Colin Farrell in the last one. Oh well, I guess beggars can't be choosers. Overall, The Crimes of Grindelwald is a very busy and convoluted mess of a story, but one that, oddly enough, I still find very watchable in my book. It's easily my least favorite film out of the entire franchise for sure, but it's far from being the life-altering dumpster fire that many have already claimed it to be. I don't know, maybe I'm biased, but I still really wish to see how this whole thing plays out in the long run. But until then, I'll be giving the second Fantastic Beasts movie a 6 out of 10. And that leads me to my personal ranking of every single film in the Wizarding World franchise. I've already let the cat out of the bag by calling the Crimes of Grindelwald my least favorite entry, so of course the movie I would rank above that would be its vastly superior predecessor, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Next up, we have our first Harry Potter entry on this list, The Half-Blood Prince, the most sexually charged PG-rated movie featuring magic and witches since Hocus Pocus, as well as a slightly better example of how you do a setup movie without coming across as blatantly obvious. Then we have The Chamber of Secrets, which lasts a bit too long after repeat viewings, especially if you watch the extended cut, but at least it gets by with possibly my favorite ending out of the entire lot, as well as the introductions of such memorable characters like Lucius Malfoy, Gilderoy Lockhart, and Dobby the House Elf, the only character besides Bill Weasley who should have stuck around for more than just 2 movies, but I digress. And just barely sneaking past those 2 is The Goblet of Fire, which used to be my least favorite Potter flick for the longest time, mostly for this stupid scene right here.
Harry, you put your name in a goblet of fire.
But the reason why I started easing up on this movie over the years was because of the fact that it was the first one in the series I got to see outside of the United States, long story, where I fully got to soak in just how massive these movies were on an international level. So yeah, I got a bit of a soft spot for this one. Moving on with another film that used to be one of my least favorites that greatly improved over time, The Order of the Phoenix, which happened to be the first movie I ever got to see in the IMAX format. Not to mention, it also has my favorite wizard duel sequence outside of the Sword and the Stone, and features a character that you just love to hate more than even the main villain. And now we finally arrive at my top 3 choices, starting with the original classic, The Sorcerer's Stone, which came at a time in our lives when we all needed magic the most, the epic 2-part finale of The Deathly Hallows, which brought everything to a beautiful close, despite a few rushed moments here and there, and the one that easily takes home the House Cup out of the entire franchise, in my humble opinion, is Alfonso Cuarón's The Prisoner of Azkaban. For me, this film had the perfect balance of childlike wonderment and mature storytelling that made the original book so appealing in the first place, something the newer films could benefit a lot more from. Whew, I'm starting to lose my voice for a second. Let me try this wand out for size.
Oh wow, that definitely makes a huge difference. Anyways, that was my review for The Crimes of Grindelwald and my entire ranking of the Wizarding World franchise. What did you guys think? If you have any questions, compliments, or advice, please feel free to leave a comment down below, and if you want to keep up with more movie reviews in the near future, go ahead and click that subscribe button. But until then, our show is now concluded. I am the host,
saying, mischief manage.